once again. Thank you all for joining us. This is Nuance. We'll be speaking of realism or the lack thereof in media, including TV shows and movies. So stay tuned for that. Of course, I'm Mike Scala, joined as always by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Not much, man. Just is it looking a little dark in here for me? Maybe I should have turned the light on before we got started, but
You guys getting the eclipse right now? Is that what's going on?
no, no, we didn't get the eclipse. It only went across the states. So, did you get out and see it?
I did not. I honestly could not care less about it. They told us it was the first eclipse in about 100 years. I guess the first solar eclipse. It's weird to me because there always seems to be something like it. Maybe not,
Right?
maybe lunar, maybe some other kind of eclipse, right? But they act every time like it's a once in a lifetime deal. And it's happened several times in my lifetime already. So I'm onto this. Something is going on here.
I swear, like I'd say the same thing. I swear it seems like every couple of years is this once in a lifetime thing. This is never coming back again in our life. It's like, didn't we just have this like a couple of years
Yeah,
ago?
yeah. Same thing with the comet, right? Halley's comet only comes around once every 8,000 years. I've heard that like 20 times already. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, like oh, it's yeah, so it's crazy. Yeah, apparently though, what was kind of funny is I guess I don't know if it's funny or sad that after the comet went, not the comet, the eclipse went through, searches on Google for why is why is my vision blurry went skyrocketed.
Wow.
So apparently some people were looking at it,
Yeah,
with
a lot of
their
people were definitely
eyes.
looking at it. You're right. And even with those glasses that they were giving out, there was a warning on there saying you shouldn't look at it for more than 3 minutes with the glasses on.
Right.
This was a big deal for a lot of people. In Albany, apparently, they canceled the legislative session to allow legislators to view the eclipse from their home districts, right? Often they go to Albany during the budget season. So a lot of
Right.
people really playing into this. I got to say, the earthquake was more eventful.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Like, that's, it's very rare in New York. The last one, if I recall, would have probably been 2011.
Yep, that's right.
Because I was there and I remember it because that was the year that Mikey D and I came out to Japan to do some shows. And that was the year Japan had their earthquake tsunami in March, and we went out and at the end of the summer. And so he was worried about that because he had never experienced an earthquake before in his life. So he was concerned. And we got there and he didn't feel any earthquakes, even though there was one, but he slept through it. He didn't feel any earthquakes. And
Did
then
you
when we
feel
got
it?
back to New York, huh?
Did you feel
Yeah,
it?
I felt it.
Okay.
Yeah, I felt it. We got back to New York, and there was an earthquake not too long after we got back. And it was just like you
Mm.
were so worried about Japan. We came back, and then it hits New York.
Okay, so now we know you brought the earthquake back to New York from Japan.
Maybe we did.
Yeah,
Maybe we
yeah.
did.
This one actually felt more intense and longer to me than what I recall
Mm,
2011 feeling like. The whole house
mm.
shook for what felt like several seconds. And then I got a text from my girlfriend in New Jersey, same thing. People were feeling this for very long distances. A lot of people apparently on the East Coast felt it. I think the epicenter was somewhere in New Jersey, but
Mm.
yeah, like you said, certainly a rare occurrence in New York. We get hurricanes every so often, but even our hurricanes tend not to be quite too bad, except for the rare occasion like Sandy and so forth. But New York is one of the only areas I think in the U.S. that isn't very prone to a whole lot of natural disaster. Right? It seems like everywhere else you go, you can deal with one thing or another. Tornadoes. Luckily, we don't get hit with too many of those either.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, like living in so many different parts of the states. Um, I remember just warnings of all of those things. Like, I lived in California, so I was where I first felt earthquakes. Um, I first time leaving out of Michigan, we were living in Arkansas, so tornado warnings. We used to have tornado drills and stuff, so we had that type of weather. In Florida, of course, hurricanes. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, so we talked about the high cost of living in New York, I guess one trade off is you're less likely to be affected by a natural disaster, although maybe not so much the case anymore, right? With this earthquake and, like I said, the hurricanes don't hit us as much, but we have been devastated. And even though Sandy, for example, was in 2012, in many ways, still rebuilding after that. So they can
Yeah,
be rare, but they still can be quite dangerous. Um,
absolutely.
so today is supposed to be a good day. Apparently, today is National or International Be Kind to Lawyers Day.
Is it?
Second Tuesday of April. Someone sent this to me earlier. Shout out to John D'Angelo for sending it to me. His daughter is a lawyer, so I guess he would know. And
Interesting.
it's apparently a deal. Second Tuesday of every April, International Be Kind to Lawyers Day. There's a whole website explaining it, what it's for, and why it's there. I gotta say, people usually are kind to me, at least to my face. I'm sure behind my back, they're talking all kinds of trash, right? And being cruel and whatever. But to my face, I can't really complain. No one really gives me a hard
Yeah, well, you are an amazing attorney. You're
time.
doing a great job. You're looking dapper and vibrant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. You passed the test. You were kind to a lawyer today.
I was kind to a lawyer today. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Be kind to lawyers. It's funny. How many people even know lawyers? Before I went to law school, I don't think I knew a single attorney, quite honestly.
Really. I
Yeah.
I used to work in an office and there were a couple of lawyers in there, but outside of that, yeah, they just weren't in my circle,
Right.
really.
Right.
I
It's
do
funny.
know when I first moved to New York and I went to a temp agency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I first got into New York, I went to a temp agency to try to find something quickly. And I remember the guy that was signing up next to me was an attorney also. I was just like, dang, it must be tough out here. Attorneys are looking for temp jobs.
Well, attorneys are always looking for work, but usually they look for legal work. So I don't know if that type of agency was connecting attorneys with legal work, because normally you go to a different type of agency for lawyers.
It was for professional stuff, but it wasn't like not like, uh minimum wage type of jobs. It was more for professional types of stuff. But it was just kind of struck me like, wow, an attorney at the temp agency? Like that's kind of crazy. Because the image is of course like temp, lawyers are making all this money. You don't need this extra thing. So
Well, but you need a job to make all that money. I mean, a
yeah,
lot of
sure, sure.
a lot of
So
lawyers are
just
looking for work,
yeah.
and it isn't always as depicted. That could be a good segue into our topic, in fact, about realism. I think much of that perception probably comes from media, right? You watch lawyers on
Right.
TV; they're always shown, for the most part, as successful, right? Very successful, very wealthy, and maybe even the need for National Be Kind to Lawyers Day because maybe they're portrayed as scummy, right? As
They
mean,
are?
self-centered, selfish people, right? Who will do anything for a buck, even at the expense of someone else. In reality, there are so many ethical obligations, which I can say I certainly take very seriously. I think there's a lot of integrity in the profession. At least there's an attempt. Maybe some of that even is to push back against the perception that it's not so ethical, right? And so there are a lot of pressures on attorneys to follow very strict rules. And I was triggered a little bit by watching the Curb Your Enthusiasm finale. Big fan, obviously, of Seinfeld back in the day. Big fan of Curb, Larry David's show. But the premise here was that the series finale of Curb, was mirrored. Hopefully, I'm not spoiling this for anyone, but I think a lot of people could see this coming.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah,
Spoiler
if you're
alert!
watching the last season, I think you probably saw it coming. It was basically a rehash of the Seinfeld finale, right? And that premise is probably humorous in that the Seinfeld finale was criticized. Some people thought at the time that it didn't live up to the hype, right? Probably the bar was set unrealistically high. Whatever they did wasn't going to match expectations. And so a lot of people over the years dumped on that finale. Oh, that was let down. They could have done better. So here comes Larry David, creator of Seinfeld, with his new show, and he ends it the same exact way that Seinfeld ended. Some people say it's kind of like, screw you to the fans who said that he dropped the ball on the Seinfeld finale, or maybe just a way to rewrite history a little bit. And maybe people watching this will laugh at it and think, okay, maybe the Seinfeld finale wasn't so bad because this is funny. I don't know. But nonetheless, same
That was
exact.
the finale where they ended up in jail,
Right.
and for not helping somebody.
Correct. But the
All
entire
right.
finale, right, that episode was them on trial. And what it did was it brought back many of the characters they collided with over the course of the series. So it was a way to get them to make their appearances again on the show. But they all testified as to the bad character of Seinfeld and his friends, right? So
Right.
they were on trial for that one thing you said, for not which but wasn't even a real law. But all right, let's pretend that that's a real law. They were on trial for not helping a pedestrian on the street, right?
It's funny you say that, and it's kind of funny we're talking about this because I remember at the time there were people who said that in certain places it was a real law.
No, no. In certain places, they have what's called a Good Samaritan law, which is what they called it on the show, but it's a different law. A Good Samaritan law in real life actually protects you if you
Right.
try to help someone, right? On the
Right.
show, they were prosecuted for what they called a Good Samaritan law, but it was the opposite. It was because they didn't stop someone from being robbed. And it was completely ridiculous because this guy on the show was being robbed at gunpoint, right? He's being carjacked,
Right.
I believe, at gunpoint. Like, what the hell were four onlookers supposed to do to stop someone with a gun from carjacking someone? You're telling me the four people who aren't armed are supposed to what jump on the guy with the gun and probably get shot themselves and cause a scene? I mean, as it unfolded on the show, yeah, the guy got the car. I believe that's what it was. He got carjacked, but no one was physically harmed. If Seinfeld and his friends would have jumped on this guy, then probably people would have ended up getting shot, right? And so clearly not what they would have been advised to do, and no law would put that burden on them to try to be a vigilante and stop a crime from happening, a violent felony from taking place. That's not the job of an onlooker to do. So putting that aside, right? The whole show was them on trial for breaking this law. However, the prosecution made its case by calling all these other characters that had been on, and they weren't
Mhm.
talking about that particular crime or alleged crime. They were talking about, well, they're bad people because they did this to me or they did that to me over the years. And that would never be allowed in a court of law. Not like that, right? This is a crime about a very specific instance being alleged. You can bring in people who saw that happen, right? Eyewitnesses, certainly. You can't bring in character witnesses to say that, well, because they're bad people or they were mean to me, they're unkind to me in a social situation, that means that you should find them guilty for breaking this law, right? That would not be allowed. That would be considered too prejudicial to the jury and not relevant to the crime at hand. You can't do that. And so the Curb finale did basically the same thing. It was a different law, right? And actually,
Mm.
in this case, they had Larry David on a law that is real. It's a ridiculous law, but it is a real law. It's the Georgia, quote unquote, Election Integrity Act, which is the law that says you cannot give water to voters standing online at the polls. Have you heard about that one?
Mm. Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. So famously or infamously, maybe that law has been attacked as a form of voter suppression, right? Because you have people out there in Georgia, oftentimes very hot, they're sweating, they're online for a long time, and
Right.
you're not allowed to even give them water. And so it's really discouraging people from voting, it's disenfranchising people, and it's a really stupid law, but it does exist.
Right.
And so Larry was on trial for breaking this law. However, the trial, again, was about all of the people he's interacted with over the course of the series, and then coming in, telling him how bad he, or telling the court how bad of a person he is. And that's why the jury should find him guilty. It has nothing to do with whether he broke this law. And in fact, before we even get to that, as Sheba joins us in the League of Women Voters, what's going on, Sheba?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, Sheba.
Sheba,
Yeah.
did you happen to catch the Curb Your Enthusiasm finale?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so
Do you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm?
I do. Sometimes I do.
okay, so
So,
the
spoiler alert, we're
yes,
talking he's
yeah. So the
talking about the
finale,
finale.
right, which just aired this past Sunday, it had Larry on trial as a rehash of the Seinfeld finale,
Oh,
to try to prove or try to convict him of breaking this Georgia election law. They had character witnesses from his past come in and testify, much like on Seinfeld, about how bad of a person he was. Now, I know some people will say, well, the whole point was to mirror the Seinfeld finale, so why wouldn't they do the same thing? The thing is this, my gripe as an attorney is they could have gotten the law more right and still done that same thing. It wouldn't have messed with the plot in any way, because all I
Yeah.
had to do, if they wanted to bring in these character witnesses who had made cameos, over the course of the series or whatever, all they had to do was have someone go up there on the stand and testify about his good character, right?
Right.
If the defense chose that tactic to say, well, he's a good guy, therefore he would never break a law like this, which is kind of silly. But if that's the route that they took, we're going to talk about his good character. That does open the door for the prosecution to rebut that testimony with witnesses to talk about his bad character. But that
Right.
wouldn't be for the purpose of saying that he broke the law per se. It would be for the purpose of impeaching that testimony. So if someone says, he's such a good guy, you can say, oh, really? And have these people come in and cast doubt on that by saying that he's a bad guy. And that just, basically it's a counter argument to the evidence that was presented in the first place. So that could have been done. All they had to do is have one of his supporters, his friends, maybe even the lady he gave the water to, testify and say he's such a great guy. He would never do this, right? He's a great guy. I've known Larry for 20 years. He's such a great man. Let me tell you how great he is, right? And then you would have his lawyers go like that because she just opened a door to character. Then you could have the prosecution say he's such a great guy. Oh, really? Right? And do this. We're not introducing it for the purpose of proving his guilt. We're doing it for the purpose of impeaching that testimony that he's a good guy. And so that's all it had to do to provide that level of legal realism. And it was kind of annoying to me that they didn't do that because people watch these shows and they think that that's how court actually plays out. That's how trials actually work. And maybe there should be a legal consultant, like Law and Order, I think had legal consultants. Maybe you should have someone like that on a show. Like this is an HBO show. I mean, it wouldn't have been a major expense to just check that. It wouldn't have changed the plot in any meaningful way, but it would have alleviated, this concern of them just completely getting the law wrong.
Yeah, a lot of shows have legal consultants. I think probably since it's a comedy show, they, probably weren't too concerned with it was more about making the scene funny.
Right. Right. But but again, the scene could have still been funny if they did it right. And also they're blurring reality, like they're blurring lines a little bit here because they're using an actual law that people know about. And the one good thing that I'll say about this, I was looking online. A lot of people didn't know that was a law, and they were like, "Oh, come on, this is so unrealistic. Who would have a law like that?" Then they started looking into it, and they were like, "Oh, wait a minute, there actually is a law in Georgia on the books that says that," and that actually infuriated people.
What law is that?
That's the law that says you can't give water to a voter waiting online at the polls.
Oh.
Yeah, and so people realized that was a real law and effectively a form of voter suppression. And I think it woke people up, which probably was the intent of doing that. It was making fun of it, it was making a comedy out of it, but it also was bringing attention to a real life issue. And I applaud them for doing that. But while they're doing that, they could have taken some steps because I was watching the season unfold, and it was starting off better than the Seinfeld finale in that it wasn't condensing the entire timeline to 2 days. If you watch the Seinfeld finale, the entire process of them getting arrested and arraigned, indicted, trial, convicted, it all happens in like 48 hours or something like that, right? This current finale was more realistic in that he got arrested in the beginning of the season and it unplayed over the course of the whole season. So he was going to lawyers, and if you saw the different process play out, he had a mock trial at one point, right? So you saw that it wasn't an overnight thing. So that was good. One thing I also, though, had a problem with, and this, I guess, is when I first started getting nervous about where it was going. He pled guilty, right? He was going to plead guilty and take a plea deal and then not have to worry about being sentenced, just kind of like a slap on the wrist, plead guilty kind of thing. He was convinced to plead not guilty for the purpose of fighting the law. So there was no question that he gave out the water on the show. The question was the law constitutional? That's how the season started off, where he was going to challenge the constitutionality of the law. And I thought from a legal perspective, this is great, right? He's going to challenge constitutionality. He was talking to lawyers about that, and they were going to file a motion and everything. And the lawyer, some comedy thing happened, but the lawyer forgot to file a motion, whatever. But it ended up proceeding into trial with the jury. And again, it had this whole Seinfeld recreation where the people are testifying about his character. Why would that even be a thing? The jury is there to decide the facts. They're the fact finders. So if the strategy is we're going to argue this law is unconstitutional, you don't need a jury. Judges determine that. Judges determine whether
Right.
something is constitutional or not. The jury
Mhm.
is there to decide the fact, but the facts were not in dispute. There really was no reason to have a trial by jury here because he admitted to giving the water out. So everyone knows he broke the law. The question is the law itself constitutional? The law really was on trial. That's how it was being set up in the beginning of the season.
Right.
And then they got to the end of the season where they're like, oh no, we're going to trial and we have to convince the jury you're a good person. That has nothing to
Right.
do with anything. That's just
Yeah.
completely unrealistic. And they could have done, like I said, they could have done a very similar episode by just changing a couple small things around that wouldn't have really affected the comedy in any way, unless they just wanted to make the same mistakes that Seinfeld made on purpose. Maybe that was the thing. Maybe he
Mhm.
got criticism for not getting the law right on Seinfeld, and he's like, "I'm not going to learn my lesson." The title of this episode was "No Lessons Learned," so maybe he did that
Mhm.
intentionally. Right? Maybe he was like, "You know what? I'm going to show you. I'm going to make the same legal mistakes I made last time." I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm just saying he didn't have to do that.
You think it's
Mhm.
detrimental to have some of these legal mistakes on these TV shows?
I think so because
Yeah.
people have approached me asking for legal advice, and they'll tell me why I saw something on this TV show.
Mhm.
They assumed that it was true because it was on TV.
Mm.
Yeah.
What do you think, Shiba?
I think yes, yes. People watch TV and they take it just like with movies. They take it seriously.
Yeah,
And I think, yeah, if you're going to do something like that, especially when it comes to the law, I think you should have legal advice before you um, show something like that. Because, like you're saying, someone's going to believe it. And with us not having enough information on some of these laws, it can be very tricky.
yeah, yeah. And I guess the counterpoint to that is it is a TV show. It's a comedy. You're not supposed to take
Yeah.
it seriously, but they are presenting it as based on something real, right? So
Right.
I think they could do a better job. They could be less careless with
But
that.
you know something, Mike, like you say, you have to be careful because I remember when we used to read when you get the Sunday newspaper and you have the comics. Although they had the comics, there were some truths they were putting in those comics, but you had to catch that.
Right, right.
Mm.
So with this, what you're saying is that you have to catch what's real from what's not real. And if you're
Yeah,
not savvy about about some things, it's like, oh, that's the truth. I didn't know they did that.
yeah, yeah. And we were talking before we went live about the common misconception that police officers who are undercover have to tell you that they're cops if you ask them, right? A lot of people
Right.
seem to think that that's real. That if you ask someone if they're a cop and they say no, but they turn out to be a cop and they arrest you, that's entrapment. And that's not entrapment, but that's a very common myth that's out there because of what you see on TV and in movies often.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Definitely people get that from television.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
famously in Blow. I remember the movie Blow with PB Herman's character saying, "Are you a cop? Because if you are, you have to tell me." That people think that.
Yeah, people definitely believe that. So,
Yeah, and so how much responsibility really is on the media? And I'll say this too. TV shows and movies are one thing. I often read articles, and I know people will say that the news often now is just entertainment, right? But I read
right.
articles that purport to report on law, on legal issues, trials happening, right, and so forth. And they get the law very wrong, and they're reporting it as if it's news, and people are obviously going to repeat
Mhm.
that. They're not saying it's a TV show; it's a comedy. It's not for laughs. It's for likes, right? It's for clicks. But
Right.
right, they're presenting it as though it's true, and I get that it's hard. If you're not a lawyer, you're a reporter, and you're trying to process this information and present it to an audience that isn't lawyers, it's going to be hard to do that effectively and accurately. But I think there's more of a responsibility there to try. Maybe they should have more legal consultants or people who can look it over and say, hey, you mischaracterized the law there or what's going on, right? Because people will have misconceptions, even when it comes to trials, like all these Trump trials. You see these articles come out and they just completely get it wrong about what's happening in the law in
Mhm.
the court. And then people start repeating that on social media because they're getting it from the articles, right?
Right.
Right.
I think more care should be taken there.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, and people should also, there is a responsibility on people to do their own research to some degree, to not take it. I mean, if you're looking at a comedy show, you shouldn't be like, well, okay, this is gospel. It's
Right.
it's or a movie, even a movie. Like we know movies are fantasy because we could even take that out further, right? Like should they be take more care to represent real events more accurately?
Mm-hmm.
Which is commonly an issue with either documentaries or based on real event type of
Uh-huh.
movies where they change the history. Like Oppenheimer, like there was a lot of things in there that didn't really happen, but they put it in there for dramatic sake or whatever. So
Uh-huh.
Could you
it's like how
imagine,
much.
Jay, if you were on trial for breaking some random law and then the trial was about the prosecution calling people that you've known over the past 20, 30 years of your life, talking about how you slighted them in all these different ways, and that's why you should be found guilty of breaking this law? Nothing to do with the law at all, just because
Right.
they thought that they had a bad interaction with you a long time ago. That would be crazy.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering who would they even call? I wonder. I'm sure there's a few people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ex-girlfriends, right? It could be anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
So
So, all right. The poll question of the week, I was going to frame it as TV shows and movies, but maybe we should expand that to media in general. Although, I don't know. Does that load the question? Because if I say media, does everyone just think, yeah, of
yeah,
course?
yeah. Go TV shows and
Mhm.
movies.
We'll do TV shows and movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the poll question of the week is, should TV shows and movies do a better job depicting legal issues with realism so as to not confuse the public?
Yeah, I think that that's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you say media, everyone's just going to say yes, of course.
Yeah, because yeah, people would think when you say media, more likely they're going to be thinking news.
News. Right,
Uh-huh.
right. But as
Mhm.
we mentioned, they should also take better care for sure.
Absolutely,
Probably
absolutely.
especially that, right? And that's a problem, right? When even the news isn't getting it right, how can we expect a comedy show to?
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
yeah.
All right. Well,
So
speaking of polls, we had a poll last week, right?
we did have a poll last week, and our poll last week was in regards to was kind of prompted by Mayor Adams's appearance on the Breakfast Club, where he was talking about the migrant crisis in New York City.
Mm.
And he once again identified Governor Abbott as one of the causes for what's going on in New York City. So our poll question was, do you believe that Governor Abbott of Texas deserves more of the blame for the migrant crisis in our major cities? And of course, because what's happening is the migrants, New York is not a border state. The migrants coming over the border in Texas, Governor Abbott has been busing them up to New York to take advantage of New York's sanctuary city laws, even though that's not what it was intended for. And so the poll question results, we had a number of votes, and we've got 70% said yes, Governor Abbott deserves more of the blame, 21% no, and 10% I don't know.
Okay. One thing I'll mention, it isn't only about the sanctuary city laws because we don't know how many of these people are here out of status, right? The
Right,
sanctuary city is really meant to protect people who are undocumented from being
right,
reported to the federal authorities. In this
right,
case, they are following a process. Now we're so backed up that it's certainly likely many people are sneaking through the cracks and really shouldn't be here, but are trying to take advantage of that system.
Mhm.
But we can't say that these migrants, by and large, are undocumented or are here illegally, right? "Quote unquote," because they actually are seeking asylum and there is a legal process for them to do so. It's just that the
right,
process is so backlogged right now.
right. So, one thing, a number of these comments um pointed, had said that Eric Adams should bus the migrants back to Texas.
Which
Like,
is, yeah, he doesn't have the legal authority to do that, but that is an interesting thought experiment, right? Because you can make the case that, hey, if Abbott can get away with it, why can't he? In the reverse direction.
Right.
But it's like the I mean, one of the oppositions against just busing people to another state and dropping them off is like they're people, they're not cargo. And so this idea that,
Uh-huh.
oh, well, we're just gonna bus them back and drop them off, like it's like we're still talking about people here.
Right. And also, it isn't just a sanctuary city status, it's the right to shelter that we have in New York. And so,
Right,
right, folks who are homeless in New York do have a right to be taken care of. And so, sending them out wouldn't be meeting those obligations.
right. So
Well,
this person,
Would New
oh, go
York
ahead.
be at fault if they did send them back?
New York would be breaking the law, yeah.
Yeah. And that
Oh.
was one of the thing, that was one of the things that Mayor Adams tried to clear up on that Breakfast Club interview when Charlemagne was like, well, you kind of caused this because you invited them here. And he's like, whoa, wait, no, the law, because of the law, there's nothing I can do about it. They're here. That's not what the law was for. First of all, it's not what the law says. And we have to take care of them because that's what the law is.
Right,
That's, you know,
right.
nothing that I
However,
have to.
sure. However, the right wing talking point in all that is that the way the laws are set up have the cumulative effect of
Right,
inviting people in, right? And putting that strain on our resources. So what they're trying to say is you should change these laws if you don't want this climate to continue to get worse.
right. So one of the comments was saying that he should bus the migrants back to Texas and tell Greg Abbott that if he continues to do this, the FBI and Department of Justice would be told about what he did and that he should be arrested for human trafficking.
Oh, I'm sure they don't know what he did.
Right. Yeah, like people already know that. It's very common knowledge, especially I'm sure the FBI and the Justice Department.
Right.
So, but yeah, human trafficking was mentioned several times.
Yeah, and I'm sympathetic to that point of view, especially if you aren't being honest about
Right.
what you're doing. You're telling people to get on buses. We're going to send you someplace where a job is waiting for you, where you have all these things, and you're not accurately depicting the reality of the situation. Does everyone even know they're being sent to New York? Who's coming here? Because I've heard
Right.
accounts that they were being lied to about physically where they were being sent.
Right.
So it isn't a stretch to characterize that as a form of trafficking.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, that's true. But what I don't understand is how Governor Abbott could just tell them that it was okay for them to come here, or we can put them on the bus and send them here. Because what laws are in Texas
That's the thing. Obviously, Texas's laws aren't as strict as New York's.
mm,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's almost across the board, right? I mean, I even see discussions with Uber drivers arguing, Texas Uber drivers arguing with New York Uber drivers about what the rules and the laws governing them are. And the Texas drivers always say, it's my car, my rules. I can do whatever I want. What are you talking about? And in New York, they'll
mm,
say, no, listen, we actually have rules, right? There's a TLC
right,
commission you have to abide by, and we have these regulations. You know, Texas is more of a free for all. It's more like the Wild West, you know?
mhm.
Right. So,
Wow, it leads to a lot of a thorough discussion, a lot to think about, because once you cross the border into New York State, that means that we have to take you in. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, you're in already. If you're homeless in New York, there's a right to shelter that New
So
York has.
that's yeah, in the New York State.
Yeah.
right. One person brought up, it's like, yeah, that Abbott does deserve, he said, deserves heaps of blame, but he will instead enjoy the reward locally of being the man who sent the migrants out of the state to become the blue state's
Yeah.
problem.
Right. And that's the thing. They love him for doing it there, but
Yeah,
here he's not getting the heat. It's really weird. It's like he's getting
No, it's
away
not.
scot free on this, right? Because his supporters love it, but the people who don't like it aren't attacking him so much for it. It seems they're
but what is it?
on
What is it?
Adams and on the governor and on the president. How come he's not getting the blame, right? You would think that would be a double-edged
Mhm.
sword. You do that, yeah, that your supporters
Right.
who like that really love you for it, but the people that you're sending the migrants to, oh, they're really going to hate you for it, right? But he's getting the love, but not the hate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
what is it that New York could do to pressure him though, or even New York City, or even people in New
Mhm.
York or these big cities?
Well, is it a matter of pressuring him or placing the blame where it belongs? Because what's happening is we're not able to achieve much, even locally in New York, because we're all pointing
Right,
fingers at each other. And
right.
the mayor's getting heat for it. The governor's, it's the mayor's fault. It's the governor's, no, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's the president's fault. I mean, if we could all just look and say, no, listen, this is largely an issue caused by the governor of Texas. He's the real culprit. Now, can we work together and recognize that we have all common ground here? We don't need to be fighting each other, because what it's doing is it's causing a lot of infighting in New York. And I think that was also uh, a deliberate effect. I think he was trying to do that. I think he was trying to get people mad at each other here. And
Uh-huh.
that has worked, and that has stood the way
Yeah.
of progress.
Right. Well, I mean, even if they did that and said, okay, well, let's put more of the blame on Abbott, and then you say, well, then you take that next step, like you said, okay, well, so let's work together and deal with this. The
Right.
reality still becomes different areas' resources have to go to that, and that's what they don't want because they're trying to deal with their own areas. And so
Right.
ultimately, it's going to come back to the same situation. Be like, okay, yeah, we blame Abbott, but they're still in New York City, so you've got to take care of that. We don't want any of that up here because we've got our own stuff.
Right. But what if everyone in New York was on the same page and decided, okay, one of the solutions could be to advocate so that these folks could get work permits easier and they're not just draining resources? Maybe that entails lobbying DC more. But if you have a more unified front, if you have the
Mm,
city and the state, all of our officials at every level of government working for a common goal, then
Uh-huh.
I think it's easier to get things done, right? As opposed to trying to go to DC to push for something when even half of us are now pointing the finger at the other half of us, and we're not united on the issue.
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It
it's
is.
about political capital, right? You don't want it to be split. You want to spend your political capital fighting yourself. You want to pull it together and focus it where it needs to be focused to get the maximum bang for your buck.
Uh-huh.
And this does take a lot of political capital. It takes a lot of heavy lifting to make the reforms in these areas.
Yeah. So,
It's a divide and
but
conquer strategy, right? Age old in politics, divide and conquer, right? People are not together on an issue. It's easy to exert your
Well,
influence over them
it's,
because they're not working
it,
together.
it's interesting that you should say that, Mike, because I was listening. Donald Trump had come on one of the news I was listening to. I forgot which one it was, but anyway, he said that he was going to leave the abortion decisions up to the states.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be very interesting
Well, that's what the Supreme Court
because
said.
he is, hmm?
That's what the Supreme Court said. It's up to the states.
Right, and he made that statement too. But it's going to be interesting because how when you're talking about a unified front, how these states, each state is going to handle this issue because they're going to be all over the place.
Right.
I think.
That was the whole danger with overturning the federal right to it, right? You're leaving it up to the states. And if you have a state legislature that isn't on board with it, that's against it, then in your state you won't have that access.
Right, but what do you think about, say, for instance, just say a state like Alabama
Mm-hmm.
penalizing a woman from Alabama that would want to come to a state that legalizes abortion and putting her in jail?
Right. I think that's unconstitutional, but I also think that you'll see effort
How is it
like that.
unconstitutional if the Supreme Court did away with Roe versus Wade?
No, the Supreme Court said that there's no federal right to abortion anymore. They said the states could decide if it's legal in their state. But you're talking about one state punishing you for what you do in another state
Right,
and doing something that's legal in that state, right?
right,
I mean, there are rights, for example, to travel. To just because you're a citizen of one state doesn't mean that uh, you can't go to another state and enjoy everything that state has to offer. Something called the P&I clause, privileges and immunities. So just based on your residence, you can't be punished for traveling somewhere else and following the law there. In the U.S., we follow the laws of where we are.
But that has happened too. That was a law in one of the states. I'm going to look it up, but that was one of the in one of the states. They said
sure. They're trying to do that. What I'm saying is, I don't think it's constitutional, but they're still going to pass.
But when you say constitutional, are you saying constitutional to the state or constitutional to the Supreme Court? Which one? Because each state has to have their own laws, right?
Each state has
but the
Constitution
to do in that state. You're talking about something different. You're talking about punishing someone for doing something in another state.
Right.
Yeah, that's different. That's not what the Supreme Court decision was about.
But they can frame it that way, right? If you leave it up to the states, can the states say we can punish a woman that does that?
Legally,
they're
no.
trying. Some are trying, but
constitutionally, no. I don't think so.
What constitution are you basing it on? That's my question.
The U.S.
Constitution. The U.S. Constitution.
Okay, you're basing on okay. So what about the state that says
violating the Constitution by having a law like that?
Yeah, but you're talking about abortion.
What about it?
What about it?
So how can that be? You can say it's unconstitutional in that state. If that state says it's illegal in my state.
No, that state would be now trying to enact legislation affecting other states, not just their own state. They would be saying that you couldn't even have an abortion in a blue state.
The state that doesn't, the state that does not happen,
we lost your
audio.
We lost your audio.
The state that says you can't, we're against that. They can also say that we prohibit, and I've heard that. There was a state that did that. I'll say try.
Right.
If you go
trying to do that,
to another state to do that,
they're trying to do that.
Right.
But you're asking me if they have the legal authority to? My legal opinion is no, they do not.
And you said it's based on the U.S. Constitution.
Right.
But what about the state law?
It is a state law. You're describing a state law, but what you're saying is they're trying to enforce other states' laws too.
Right. Or can they do that?
Legally, no. You asked me that like 3 or 4 times. I keep saying no.
You said legally no, but how do you stop it from happening?
There would be lawsuits, and it would have to go up to the Supreme Court. And hopefully the Supreme Court does side with the Constitution on this. They can get it wrong, and we can disagree if it comes to that. I wouldn't be surprised if they got it wrong, but at the same time, they don't get everything wrong either. I mean, there still is a Constitution. There still is due process in this country, even though it's being chipped away at, right?
Yeah.
But then you also have to ask yourself, forget about abortion. I mean, you're looking at the one issue, but that would open the door to a much broader question of, could a state penalize people who are residents of that state for breaking their state's laws, even if they're doing it in a state where it's legal to do? So it's really not even a question about reproductive rights or abortion at that point. It's a question of can states basically say, if you live here, anywhere you go in the country, you must follow these laws. But that's not how our constitutional system is set up, right? There's a privileges and immunities clause where if you are in a state, you enjoy the same rights as well as responsibilities as anyone else physically in that state. There's also a right to travel, interstate travel. And so you have a right to move around the country freely and not be held back by whatever laws are in your state.
Interesting.
So,
yeah. There are,
think about this, Sheba. Just one last thing. Think about
it'd be like the state owns you.
Yeah, right. I just thought,
think about guns, for example, right? Like, let's say you have a state that makes it very hard to carry a gun, right? But you go to a state now where everyone can carry a gun. It's very easy to do it, right? Could your home state prosecute you for going to another state like Texas, let's say, and carrying a gun openly? right? You don't see that would be a violation of your rights because now you're in an environment where everyone around you potentially has a gun, but you can't carry that gun even though it's legal where you are because your state says you can't do it back there. That state law is supposed to affect what happens in that state. They're not supposed to make laws for when you go to other states. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So
It does bring up a question though, because there is a law, there are some laws that do that.
in some areas like taxes, right?
Well, even for example, if you know, there's an issue with people going overseas to um do sex tourism with minors.
You just took us to a whole different place. All right.
But it's the
Yeah, yeah,
same, like it's illegal in the United States, but in certain countries, you go to the laws are the age of consent is much lower. But if you're a U.S. citizen and you go there to do that, it's still illegal for you. You could be held liable when you come back.
right.
If you go there for the express purpose of
If you
doing
go
that.
there for that purpose, but now you're talking about breaking federal
Yeah.
law, right? Or you're talking about breaking a state's law.
But well, federal or state doesn't matter in that regard. You're outside of the country, you're in a different location where it is legal, but
Yeah,
back
Like
home they would find you legal when you get back, saying, "Hey, you did that over there."
you made your whole trip though to break
Yeah.
U.S. law.
And that's kind of what people are saying in regards to the abortion thing. You made your whole trip to
right.
break our state law.
But that's what
So
happens within
See?
the borders of that state. You're going outside that state now, so there's a different law that applies.
and that's what I'm saying. There's a similarity to that when
Right.
going overseas, right? You're in a different country. Those laws apply when you're there,
But aren't you? You're
but some
determining
U.S.
you're
laws
taking
still
someone
apply.
from your state. So aren't you
I'm
committing?
sorry?
You're saying you're taking someone from your state and bringing them overseas illegally?
No, no, no. If you went on yourself, you decided you're going to
Yeah.
go over to wherever country and where it's, let's say age of consent's 14, you want to go over there and do your thing and
Oh, you shouldn't be prosecuted in your own state for that. If you're saying you follow the laws of where you are and you didn't commit any crime, so why would you be
right.
prosecuted? You wouldn't be prosecuted for
Right.
that.
So someone decides that they're going to leave the United States for a week and go to wherever this country is.
Yeah.
Age of consent is 14, and they go and they have sex with minors
Mm-hmm.
in that country, um, and then they come back to the States. Um,
Who would be prosecuted for that? I never heard of that.
that it is
But
that's
that's, yeah,
illegal.
that's then, but if they find that out,
That's
then
illegal. Yeah.
yeah, if they find it out and that's what you're doing, it is, and you will,
It depends on where you are, though. So it doesn't make any sense to me. Like even state by state, right? Age of consent varies by state. Like in New
Right.
York, it's 17. So you're telling me someone from a state where the age of consent is 18, if they come to New York and they have sex with a 17-year-old, they can be prosecuted when they go back home.
I don't know about that regards. I'm just familiar with the international one because I just
right.
remember that it was big news as far as sex tourism and how it was on the rise, and there were
There may be
Mhm.
warnings.
something more to that aside from just age of consent, though. It may
Right.
be a U.S. law that they're talking about breaking, like a federal law
Yeah.
involving trafficking, maybe taking someone across U.S. across international lines.
Not about taking people, about once you get there and
Yeah,
doing it. It's just
right.
about the
Yeah,
act. It was
you would have
if
you would
Uh-huh.
you
have to
go
show
there with the intent of
if you
doing
go there with
that, then you're
Right.
breaking
and it
U.S.
wouldn't
law.
violate any federal law. You're saying just your state's age of consent law, your home state's
No,
age.
no, no. Just whatever the state or even the national law, because
Well, age of
child
consent
sex with
is state by state.
I don't know how it works out then, but I know that was one of the things that was being brought up
You
in
would have
that
to show me that, and it's also
yeah,
possible if there is a law on that is unconstitutional. And there are
interesting.
many laws out there that are unconstitutional. But
Right.
you're also
I
talking
say I
about
say
something. You're also talking about something international versus
right.
state by state, right? And again, we
Yeah.
have a P&I clause which applies to people traveling freely within the U.S. If you're a citizen of the U.S., you enjoy the same rights as anyone else in the U.S. and you can travel anywhere in the U.S. You shouldn't be held back just by your home state's laws if you're in another state.
Right. Yeah, so I'm just that the reason it brought it up is because it was kind of like the thought process to how
Mhm.
these red states are trying to prosecute women for going to other states where it's legal is kind of
Right.
similar, and they would probably point to something like that to say, "Hey, look, we already
If
do
there's any
something
kind
like
of
this."
precedent, or like I said, not to give them their argument for them, they can start talking about taxes.
Right,
Follow the income
Mhm.
tax of where you live, and then
right,
obviously it isn't always enforced that way. If you go make a big purchase in Delaware and there's no taxes on something, you're probably not going to pay taxes on it. But as far as I know, I could be wrong on this because I don't really look into tax law much, but my belief is always technically you would have to pay the taxes of where you live, even if you go to another state and they have a different tax rate.
right, right. True, true.
So the bottom line, I think, not to get ahead of ourselves on the bottom line of nuance,
Uh-oh.
but on this
Mhm.
particular discussion is there are dangers, right? Even if states do something which we can argue is unconstitutional, it may not stop them from doing it or trying it.
Right.
Until a
That's the
law,
what,
yeah, until a law is
and that's what I was
invalidated,
trying to get at. That's why I'm saying they
right?
can't get, what is the reach? How far can they reach?
And that's
It's
right. They can
scary.
be, they can certainly be in violation of their jurisdiction by trying
Right.
to enforce another
Right.
state's laws in their own boundaries, but they may still do that and they may still penalize people in the meantime, even if it does get overturned down the line. What about in the interim, right? Because
Right.
legislatures pass laws all the time, governors sign laws all the time that are unconstitutional and that violate people's rights, right? And that are messed up, they're
Mhm.
wrong, they're morally wrong. It doesn't stop that
Hmm.
from happening. And so there is
Right.
real danger here, regardless of whether the Constitution is supposed to protect us.
Right.
So,
So.
all right, well, I think we got off on a bit of a tangent. I'm not even sure how we got to that topic.
No, I asked a question. I apologize. Was I wrong for asking the
No.
question
I'm
or
just, I just forgot even how we even ended up there. What were we talking about?
We were talking about the migrant crisis and Abbott
yeah.
getting more blame for
Yes, that's what we were
the migrant
talking
crisis.
about.
Yeah, yeah, we took a little trip there.
Yeah.
So
But thanks,
So,
Mike. I learned, thanks for explaining and
yeah, it'll be a
Jay
fight,
for having
and I am
allowing the
aware,
discussion to happen. Hmm?
right? I am aware of these efforts, and it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a big court battle, and obviously there will be lawyers on the other side disagreeing with me and saying, "Oh,
Yeah.
sure, states can do that," right? So we have to see
yeah.
how this all plays out. Um, with the time we have left, I actually wanted to talk about what is the county committee because I made the announcement. I mentioned it on here before that I'm running for re-election to the Queens Democratic County Committee. A lot of people are not going to know what that is, and some people, perhaps cynically, but I don't think entirely wrongly, will point out that this is often by design. Right? There are a lot of structures in our system that are meant to be kept from the public, at least from the public knowing a whole lot about them. And my view is people should know more about what goes on, right? We've talked about how you learn about the president and Congress and maybe the Supreme Court when you're in school. Very rarely do you get actual civic lessons where you're learning about your local governments, right? Your state legislatures, your city councils, your community boards. Forget about that. So now when you start getting into something like the county committee, I think it's completely foreign to those, uh, really everyone except those who are paying deep attention to what's happening locally, right? I saw an article where someone described the entire system as sort of an underground politics, right? Underground elected officials. Kind of made me chuckle a little bit, like an analogy to underground rappers, right? We used to talk about that. You had your underground rappers, MCs, and your more mainstream ones. So someone said people like on the county committee or district leaders even could be looked at as these underground elected officials. But we've also stated that people closest to the ground really have more impact over your day-to-day lives, right? You
Right.
see more media coverage about your national figures, and sometimes they do affect what happens locally in your life, but I think overall what goes on day to day in your life is more affected by your hyper local officials, right? They're the ones who are tasked with overseeing in some form or fashion the locale where you live, right? So they're not looking at the whole country broadly and just thinking of federal policy or your entire state, let's say. They're actually looking at what goes on the blocks where you live. And there are people who are supposed to be looking at that, right? I think most people wouldn't have any idea who these folks are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. People show up more for the big show.
Mm-hmm.
It gets more publicity and everything. There's a
Absolutely.
ton of different positions that, like you said, affects their day-to-day lives or have more in their the immediate effects on them.
Right. All right. So,
Yeah.
what exactly then is the county committee? I thought since schools don't teach it, I would talk a little bit about it. Each party has their own, the Democrats and the Republicans, although I'll say it gets actually a little different because while the parties all have district leaders, what they do at the county committee level actually can vary, right? And it may depend on the size of the party. Don't forget, it isn't just Democrats or Republicans. You have in New York, you have the Working Families Party, you have the Conservative Party. But certainly the Queens County Democratic Committee is the building block of the Queens County Democratic Party. It's the people who are the local party leaders who vote on party policy, on executive positions within the party. They have very specific roles, like if there's a vacancy in a seat, for example, let's say your state senator or your state assembly person were to leave office in the middle of their term. Well, that would trigger a special election. But we don't have primaries for these elections in New York. The parties put candidates up. So the Democrats are going to pick a candidate, the Republicans are going to pick a candidate, and they go head to head. So people, when they get to vote, they vote on one of these candidates that the parties picked. Well, how do the parties pick these candidates? If not through a primary, it's through the county committee, actually. So the county committee will get together and vote on who the candidate, who the nominee is actually going to be. So that's a really important role. There was a stat that came out that said that I believe, I may get this wrong, I think it was a third. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was a third of state legislators in New York were chosen by their county committee because oftentimes this ends up happening when someone leaves in the middle of their term and there's a special election. And that could happen if someone dies, if they resign, if they're indicted, right? In New York, that does happen. So, very important role. Also for choosing judgeships, right? Someone being supported by the party for judge. Also for nominating boards, the Board of Election Commissioners. And so when people go to vote, right, the Board of Elections is overseen by commissioners. They're Democratic appointees, Republican appointees. Who, how do you decide who gets chosen to be a commissioner? The county committee does that. Now, what they do is each party votes, right? The Democrats have an allotment, the Republicans have an allotment of commissioners. So the Democratic county committee will put someone up for nomination. They'll vote on who their candidate is going to be, and then they go to the city council for approval, much like how at the federal level you have the president nominating someone, let's say a Supreme Court justice or cabinet member. The U.S. Senate has to confirm them. The same thing happens here with the county committee nominating the commissioner and the city council approving them or not approving them, right? Same with the U.S. Senate would. So that's what it is. It's people who actually vote on party matters for the county, and it can be quite important, right? As a whole, as a body, they can make very important decisions because they are the people who make up the party. Like the joke we had on the show, there is no they when it comes to these things, right? Like they'll say, oh, such and such was put forth as a candidate. They chose, oh, well, who's they, right? People leave out that part, right? In this case, the county committee is actually the they, if you wish, that would vote on making a decision like that. Now, of course, there are influences that can weigh on them. What ends up happening is because you have so many seats and because there is, I think, a lot of obscurity or not much is known about this, there isn't a whole lot of sunlight on this, the party apparatus tends to control the majority of the county committee. The district leaders, for example, who are higher level bosses in the party, they can appoint people to the county committee when there are vacancies, or even when there aren't vacancies. When they're running for election, they put people on the petitions to make up the county committee. So these are often their allies, people that they're putting in. And so when the county committee gets together to vote, you often do see the establishment, if you wish, having most of the control over that vote, because the people in the county committee were usually put there by the leaders, right? The higher level leaders, by the establishment. So there's that. Although in recent years there was an effort to take over in Queens and in other boroughs by insurgents. And so, as I mentioned, I'm running for re-election, so I've been on the committee and I've witnessed in these meetings, it was maybe about 60-40, 60%, I would say, establishment, 40% insurgent, roughly, where people are organizing to come in and say, we're not going to pick the party choices, we're picking our own choices, right? Our outsider choices. And so that's a little bit of a civil war. It's still, I think the establishment has the edge there, but the dynamics are shifting a bit as more people are engaged. And that, I would say, even is a side effect of Trump, right? The Trump era. More people are paying attention to even local politics than ever before and getting involved in places that they never did before, right? So I would say if you go back prior to 2017, I would think you would find all of these bodies, all of these institutions being almost exclusively controlled by party establishment forces. And now you're seeing a lot more of those outside voices coming in. And that's a good thing, I think, on balance, although earlier we were talking about the dangers of not having a united front, right? Being in the Civil War, that does come with its challenges, certainly, right? But I think overall, the idea of more people getting involved is good, and more people knowing about what's going on is certainly good. And there will be some growing pains that come with that, but hopefully we end up in a good place. So I am running for, as I mentioned, re-election, and that's in the primary in June. And this is the first time, as I mentioned before, that the party actually put my name on their petition. So when I did it previously, I had to print out my own petitions with my name on it as a candidate for the county committee and get the signatures and all that. I'm still out there petitioning, getting signatures, but now it isn't just for me, it's my name on the actual party petitions. And so I do appreciate that, because I take it as a token of appreciation, or more than that, a gesture of a willingness to work together, right? To not be at all, to not be, well, it's just me doing my thing and they're over there. I was like, no, we can all work together. And there's an understanding that I do come in with a sense of independence. I've always been independent. I'm not going to be a hack or a shill, right? I think people know that about me by now. But I also will work with people who, I think I need to be working with. And it's all in the interest of coming together to deliver for the community, right? And so if we can get on the same page to the extent possible to get things done, I'm all for that. And so, I think we've seen progress in that area, and maybe some growing pains of our own, right? Over the past 12 years in this political field, coming in as an outsider, it's taken time maybe to get that acceptance, if you want to call it that, or that respect. And that's all good. So I'm excited about what the future holds in that regard.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. I did see that. And you mentioned that. Congratulations. I think it's great, considering I've been following you politically for some time. So I think that's a huge achievement.
Yes, thank you. And you've seen that I've always been an independent-minded person, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that may intimidate some, or just give people naturally the feeling of, well, we don't know what this guy is all about. Can we trust him? What's his deal? What's his agenda? Who is he? And that's going to happen. That's human nature, right? But
yes,
I think we've put the time in now where people have gotten to know me and see I'm not the boogeyman, right? And even though I may be independent, I have my own thoughts on things. I'm not here just to throw a rock at the king either. You know what I mean? I'm here to actually get things done for the betterment of the people. So
right. Yes, you are. You've always been.
So yeah, that's awesome. And I think you've got to say some nicer things, Sheba, because today is internet or National Be Kind to Lawyers Day.
Yes.
The second
I love
Tuesday in
lawyers.
April. So you got to be kind. You got to be kind to it.
Yeah, apparently so.
Yes.
But
Well,
that's what's up.
yeah, we've had a good discussion
Yes.
as always.
Yes.
We want
I
to
agree.
talk to Sheba.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I said, Sheba, it's time for you to give us the bottom line.
Oh, yes. I was thinking the bottom line is stay happy, be healthy, and most of all, be kind to lawyers.
Be kind to everyone. How about that? But today
Yes,
I'll take
everywhere.
it.
Yeah, but specifically to lawyers because you just never know when you'll need one.
Good point.
true, true, true.
And Jay,
All
where can
right.
folks find us?
They can find us on YouTube and Instagram, as well as everywhere podcasts are available. Apple Music, Amazon, Google, even Google Podcasts and all of that stuff. So yeah, pop in, leave some comments, leave some likes, some shares, and all that stuff, and interact with us.
Yes. And as
Yeah.
always, we thank you for tuning in, and we've got work to do. Catch you next time.